The Sinking City is an ambitious open-world detective game with plenty of interesting mechanics, an intriguing Lovecraftian world riddled with Call of Cthulhu-esque vibes, and extremely strong writing. Unfortunately, some jank, performance issues and other problems damage what's an otherwise refreshingly unique title. You play a war veteran turned private investigator who goes by the name of Charles Reed, a man who's looking to uncover the source behind the terrifying visions which haunt him, those of which are evidently getting in the way of a good night's kip. Charles, great name by the way, features some of the most bloodshot eyes I've ever seen from any video game protagonist. Will someone please get this man a coffee? Fresh off the boat, you're dropped in the fictional city of Oakmont during the 1920s, a city suffering from some serious flooding, dangerous supernatural sea creatures and plenty of crime. It's an undeniably bleak place, and the Sinking City does a great job of dishing out the atmosphere. Whale and fish carcasses litter the muddy streets, poverty's rife and the foggy rain clouds rarely let out. Much like developer Frogware's previous games such as the Sherlock Holmes series, this is a third-person detective game. However, this time the team's ambition clearly shines through with an open-world city to explore, survival horror elements and combat to break up the investigating. You'll converse with an eclectic array of characters as you solve various cases and uncover more about what's going on in Oakmont. The game provides straightforward dialogue choices to find out more information about the numerous crimes, problems and people, and after speaking to folks you'll learn of new information which makes its way into your case log. From here you'll gain a better idea of where to head next. Once you arrive at your destination, each investigation area offers many clues, from looking at items in the environment to utilising Reed's extrasensory powers to gaze into the past, allowing you to witness exactly what happened. These powers give vision into an alternate reality of some sort, whether it's flashbacks of the past or clues as to where to look, uncovering hidden walls or piecing together the order of events as they unfold. As you build up information around each case, you can then piece together these clues via the Mind Palace. Clues during main missions act as almost puzzle pieces. The more you gain, the more you can place together to produce a map of what happened exactly. As you build out the various deductions, you'll often be presented with multiple potential conclusions. Do you point a grieving father in the direction of the murderer of his son, or side with the murderer's telling of the story that he wasn't in a fit mental state at the time? These conclusions add an interesting dimension to the already intriguing events found throughout the game. Whilst the decisions themselves don't produce sweeping Mass Effect style impactful changes to the narrative, they do allow you to affect the way missions play out in a way that makes the story feel a little bit more personal and can produce some interesting twists and turns. Another element which I really enjoyed throughout my time with the game was the lack of hand-holding, something which you can turn down further if you see fit. Whilst the game presents you fairly clearly with all the information required, it doesn't slap you over the face with glaringly obvious point of direction like many modern titles do. Locations of interest are provided in a written form, such as an abandoned building in Northern Advent on Forefathers Street between Hellog Street and Windhalf Ave. You then cross-reference these details with your map, and it allows you to figure out roughly where that might be in the world, and then you can pin said location to your map manually. There's numerous other uniquely intriguing mechanics too, such as looking up information in the various archives lit throughout the city. From the newspaper to the police, medical, library or town hall, at times you're presented with some information which needs further investigation. For example, a criminal who's known to have committed murders previously in a specific area around a certain time. You then head to the police archives and you use said piece of info that you've already got and select 3 out of the various investigation options based on the knowledge that you have. For example, look at murder crimes that have taken place during a specific area during a specific time. From these archives, you're then able to uncover more information about said individual or a location, giving you a better idea of where to go or who to talk to next. On the default settings, the game indicates when more investigation is required, but it never outright tells you exactly where you have to look. The Sinking City expects you to use your noggin, and I appreciate that. In fact, the game is littered with smart mechanics like the above, which not only work well but feel refreshingly different, and this is all backed up by a well-written narrative throughout. Not just during the main storyline, but the game's plentiful side cases too, some of which are almost as good as the main missions. You can spend hours on a multi-tiered side case which only acts to further flesh out the world and the characters. I rarely came across a case which wasn't intriguing in some way, and whilst the game's voice acting is of a fairly decent, albeit kind of unspectacular B-tier level, the writing itself remains consistently strong. That said, there are numerous areas of the game which disappointingly let the package as a whole down. The game's combat is basic at best and poor at its worst. Aiming on a controller feels unresponsive, and I regularly wrestled with the controls to hit enemies which dodge and weave themselves out the way of your crosshairs. The weapons themselves feel weak and ammunition scarce, and the loose aiming mechanics aren't made any better whatsoever with the game's sanity mechanic. As Reed looks at the world's atrocities, including enemies, his sanity meter starts to decrease. The lower it goes, the more your aim starts to sway and hallucinations appear. On paper, it sounds fine, but in practice it just made the weak combat scenarios feel even worse. The combat clearly occurs in an attempt to mix up the game's pacing, something which a fairly basic skill system also struggles to help with. A strong third-person shooter this certainly isn't, but I do appreciate the devs' attempts to keep things interesting. This area of the game just isn't quite as tight as it could be and should be. As a result, the combat feels more like a chore than a joy when it rears its ugly head. Bugs are a fairly common affair too, although non-game breaking in my experience. Upon firing up the game for the very first time, the intro cutscene was freezing and stuttering heavily. Not the best start. Lip syncing is just okay, and I had numerous NPCs which just pop into view. There's plenty of areas of dodgy flat textures too, and occasional load screens when entering a building if the game's engine seems to be struggling to keep up with the streaming of a new environment. Performance leaves something to be desired too. Playing the game on an Xbox One X, the game appears to have an unlocked frame rate. Whilst image quality is fairly good, that frame rate fluctuates regularly and screen tearing is almost a constant issue. Honestly, this might be one of the teariest games I have ever played. As you turn the camera, tearing is almost guaranteed. Hopefully this can be cleaned up via a much needed patch. The world of Oakmont feels a little flat too, whilst the environment itself absolutely nails that dark, depressing Lovecraftian vibe, and the game's visuals can at times look fairly strong thanks to some lovely wet surface shaders and strong art design throughout. The world just feels a little too gamey. NPCs are mostly silent as they wander the city, and there's little in the way of surprises to uncover or side activities to partake in. The open world benefits the game's non-hand-holding ways mechanically, but it doesn't really manage to justify itself from an immersion perspective. It's clear the developers were super ambitious with The Sinking City, an open world detective game set in a striking Call of Cthulhu inspired world with racial tensions, unusual characters and enemies, third-person combat, decision-making, boat driving, and an intriguing story with plenty of compelling narrative threads. The team's strength shines through in the game's detective mechanics. This area of the game is undeniably strong and often refreshing. Admittedly, numerous other elements such as the combat, open world immersion and overall technical polish let the package down though. However, that's not to say the game isn't worth your time or money. The Sinking City is one of the most unique open world games that I've played in years. Developer Frogwares clearly aimed for the stars but only managed to somewhat reach the sky. Would I recommend buying the game? Absolutely. Whilst The Sinking City has numerous flaws and issues, it's still a refreshingly enjoyable game for folks who enjoy piecing together clues and solving narrative puzzles. If you're a fan of detective games or Frogwares' previous work with the Sherlock Holmes series, you're sure to have a blast here. For everyone else, it might be worth holding off a little bit until the game's technical issues are ironed out. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit that bell button for notifications when we upload further videos. It really helps the channel a lot.